Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
You're a disappointment. My father yelled, his face red with rage. She's a lawyer, and you're just playing with computers in your apartment. Then, with a smug look, he signed my entire trust fund over to my sister. I didn't argue. I just smiled, got up, and walked out. 3 years later, as I stood on the stage at my company's IPO ceremony, I finally looked at their faces. Their shock, their disbelief, it was priceless. You're a disappointment. My father's voice roared through the massive living room, his face contorted with rage. He sat behind his mahogany desk, signing away my trust fund with deliberate strokes, as if he were finalizing the execution of a failed investment. My sister Olivia stood beside him, arms crossed, wearing the same smug, knowing expression she always did. She didn't have to fight for this. She knew she had already won. She's a lawyer, Ethan, a real professional. And you're just playing with computers in your apartment. His words dripped with disdain, like I was some petulant child refusing to grow up. I glanced at Olivia, who barely hid her smirk. This was just another courtroom for her, another case she had already won before it even started. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just smiled. Then I picked up my duffel bag, slung my laptop over my shoulder, and walked out of my father's mansion. Out of that life, without looking back. The cold evening air hit me as I stepped outside, but I barely felt it. I stood at the grand entrance for a moment, staring at the towering gates that had always kept people out but had just as effectively kept me trapped in. This wasn't the first time my father had threatened to cut me off, but this time he actually did it. No safety net, no money, nothing. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't angry either. If anything, I felt free. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person who mattered right now. "It's time," I said. Jake's voice crackled on the other end. "Damn right it is." Jake and I had been working on something for months, a cybersecurity platform powered by AI that could predict security breaches before they even happened. It was revolutionary, and we knew it. But up until now, it had just been a side project. A someday idea. Well, someday had just become today. I threw my bag into the back of my beat-up Honda, a car that looked wildly out of place in front of my father's estate. One last glance at the house, and I drove off. By the time I reached Jake's apartment, my phone had exploded with messages. My mother, pleading with me to reconsider. A short, sharp text from my father. "Don't come crawling back." And of course, Olivia, "This is for your own good." I didn't respond. I just turned off my phone. Jake's apartment was the definition of barely livable. The wallpaper was peeling. The couch was more springs than cushion, and the fridge hummed like it was about to explode. But it didn't matter. This was where we were going to build something that would change everything. I dumped my bag on the floor, pulled out my laptop, and looked at Jake. "Let's get to work." The first night in Jake's apartment, I lay on his excuse for a couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of traffic outside. The room smelled like stale coffee and burnt-out ambition, the kind that lingers when you've been grinding for months without a break. There was no air conditioning, no space, and barely any furniture. But none of that mattered. I wasn't here to be comfortable. I was here to win. Jake sat at his desk, tapping away at his keyboard, the blue light from his monitor casting shadows on the peeling wallpaper. "So, what now?" he asked without looking up. I grabbed my laptop and opened our project files. Now, we stopped waiting for someone to believe in us and start proving them wrong. For months, we have been building a cybersecurity platform unlike anything on the market. It was powered by an AI that could predict vulnerabilities before hackers could even think about exploiting them. It wasn't just another antivirus. It was a game changer. But no one cared. We had pitched to investors, cold email companies, and even attended a few networking events, only to hear the same thing over and over again. Great idea, but no traction. No funding. No proof. So, we decided to make them care. Our routine became brutal. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by caffeine and desperation. Money was tight, so tight that we split every meal, living off instant ramen and whatever snacks we could scrounge up. Some nights, I stayed up until sunrise refining our code, tweaking algorithms, making our system smarter, faster. Every day, we sent out emails to potential investors and companies. Every day, we got ignored. One night, after yet another rejection email, I shut my laptop and exhaled sharply. At this rate, we're going to starve before we get a single client. Jake leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face. "Maybe we're going about this the wrong way. Instead of trying to land some big investor, maybe we just need to prove this thing works." I stared at him. "You mean, find a real client?" "Yeah. No more pitching hypotheticals. We need someone who actually needs this, someone willing to pay. It made sense. Investors wanted proof, and we didn't have any. If we could land even one paying client, we'd have something real to show. The problem was, we had no idea where to find one. 2 weeks later, we got lucky. A startup called Blackwell Tech had just been hit with a massive security breach. Thousands of customer accounts had been compromised, and their CEO, Nathan Blackwell, was getting torn apart in the media. Their reputation was tanking, and their customers were leaving in droves. Jake nudged me while scrolling through his phone. "Check this out," he said, holding up the article. "These guys are screwed." I sat up, scanning the details. "Wait, what if they aren't?" "What do you mean?" I opened my laptop. "They need help, and fast. If they don't patch their security holes, they're finished. What if we offer them a solution before they even realize they need it?" An hour later, we had analyzed Blackwell Tech's entire system, pinpointed its weak spots, and built a report detailing exactly how our software could prevent another breach. Then we sent it directly to Nathan Blackwell himself. We didn't expect a response, but the next morning, my phone rang. "This is Nathan Blackwell," a voice said. "Tell me more about this security fix you're offering." Landing Blackwell Tech as a client wasn't just about money. It was about proving our technology worked in the real world. Nathan was skeptical. He had been burned by cybersecurity firms before, and he wasn't eager to trust two nobodies with his already crumbling company. But we convinced him to give us one chance. If we could secure his systems within 48 hours, he'd pay us. If we failed, we got nothing. That weekend, we barely slept. We tore through Blackwell Tech security infrastructure, patching every vulnerability we found, testing and retesting until we were sure nothing could break through. On Monday morning, we presented our results. We showed Nathan exactly how our AI had strengthened his system, predicting potential attack points before they could be exploited. When he saw the final report, he exhaled slowly. Then he said the words that changed everything. "How much do you guys charge?" It wasn't a huge contract, barely enough to keep us afloat for another month. But it was something. More importantly, it was proof. We weren't just another failed startup. We had a real product, and now we had a paying client to prove it. That was all we needed to keep going. For the first time in months, it felt like we were actually getting somewhere. After landing Blackwell Tech as our first client, things started to pick up, slowly at first, then faster than we could have imagined. The moment we had proof that our AI-driven security system worked, companies started paying attention. It wasn't about flashy presentations anymore. It was about results, and we had them. We secured 2 more contracts in the next 2 months. They weren't massive deals, but they were enough to keep us afloat. Enough to prove that we weren't just some guys coding in a crappy apartment. We were a company. Jake and I poured every cent we made back into development, refining our system, making it smarter, stronger, more adaptive. We even hired our first contractor, a brilliant but socially awkward engineer named Priya, who lived on coffee and sarcasm. But just as things started to feel stable, Olivia came back into my life. It started with an email. Simple. Polite. "Ethan, let's talk. I might have an opportunity for you." At first, I ignored it. Then came the follow-up text. "Dad doesn't have to know, but maybe I can help." That was what got me. The way she phrased it, like she was doing me a favor, like I was some lost cause she had taken pity on. But I was curious. I wanted to know why, after all this time, she suddenly cared. I met her at a high-end cafe in the financial district, the kind of place where the cheapest coffee was $10, and everyone looked like they were closing million-dollar deals over their oat milk lattes. Olivia was already seated when I arrived, perfectly put together as always, her designer handbag neatly placed beside her. She gave me a smile, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile you use in negotiations. "You look well," she said, eyeing my hoodie and worn-out sneakers. I sat down. "Cut to the chase, Olivia. Why am I here?" She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "You're doing well. I've been keeping tabs on your company." That didn't surprise me. Olivia kept tabs on everything, especially things she thought could benefit her. "I have a contact," she continued, "a venture capitalist. Very powerful, very well-connected. He's looking to invest in cybersecurity startups. I think he'd be interested in what you and your friend have built." I studied her face, searching for the angle. "And why would you help me?" She sighed, as if I was being difficult. "Ethan, despite everything, you're still my brother. And business is business. If you succeed, it reflects well on me. If I connect you with the right people, I benefit too." There it was. The truth. Olivia never did anything unless there was something in it for her. Still, the opportunity was tempting. Investors weren't exactly knocking down our door. And if this guy was legit, it could be the break we needed. I'll think about it, I said. A week later, Jake and I found ourselves sitting in a skyscraper office, staring across the table at a man who could have been a walking Wall Street stereotype. Expensive suit, slick back hair, the kind of smile that looked practiced. His name was Victor Langley, and he wasn't just a venture capitalist, he was a shark. I've reviewed your work, Langley said, flipping through a folder like he was scanning our life stories. Impressive. Very impressive. The market for cybersecurity is growing exponentially in AI-driven solutions. That's the future. Jake and I exchanged a glance. This was promising. Langley leaned back, fingers steepled. Here's my offer. I'll invest $5 million up front, with additional funding available as needed. In exchange, I take a 60% ownership stake. I felt my stomach drop. Jake stiffened beside me. 60%. That wasn't an investment. That was a takeover. If we signed that contract, we wouldn't own our company anymore. We'd just be employees. Employees who could be replaced at any time. I kept my expression neutral. That's a high percentage. Langley chuckled. It's standard for startups with your valuation. You get security. You get resources. And, most importantly, you get to play in the big leagues. Jake didn't say a word. He just stared at me, waiting for my reaction. I glanced at Olivia. She was sipping her coffee, watching me, waiting for me to agree. To fold. To take the deal like a desperate little brother, finally coming to his senses. I closed the folder, pushed it across the table, and stood up. Thanks, but we're not interested. Langley blinked. Excuse me? I looked him dead in the eye. We built this company from nothing. We're not handing over control for a quick payout. Olivia set her cup down with a sharp clink. Ethan, be reasonable. No, my voice was steady. If our product is as good as you say, we don't need to give up control to get investors. We'll find someone who believes in us without trying to own us. Langley's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said, grabbing my bag, but at least it'll be my mistake. Jake scrambled to his feet, following me out of the room. As the elevator doors closed, he let out a low whistle. Dude, that was either the dumbest thing we've ever done or the smartest. I exhaled. Yeah, we'll find out soon enough. The fallout was immediate. Olivia called me later that night, her voice tight with frustration. You just walked away from $5 million. I walked away from getting screwed over. I corrected. She scoffed. You're a fool, Ethan. Do you even realize what you've done? Yeah, I said. I proved that I don't need you, or Dad, or anyone else trying to control me. There was silence on the other end. Then, finally, she said, You'll regret this. I smiled to myself. Maybe, but I doubt it. Then I hung up. The next morning, I got a text from Jake. It was a screenshot of an email from a different investor, one who had been watching us closely, waiting to see if we'd cave, or if we were the kind of founders who knew their worth. The email was short. Simple. Let's talk. I think you guys are onto something big. And, just like that, we had something better than money. We had leverage. Months passed, and the grind didn't get easier. If anything, it got worse. We were barely scraping by, barely sleeping, barely holding it all together. But we refused to give up. After walking away from Olivia's golden opportunity, we found ourselves back in the trenches, hunting for investors who wouldn't try to own us. We had a few conversations, got some polite rejections, and once again, we were running low on cash. Jake and I stretched every dollar we had. We split grocery bills down to the last cent, worked side gigs for quick cash, and took on a few small-time security audits just to stay afloat. Our system was getting better, smarter, faster, but no one cared unless we had a major client to prove it. We needed something big, something undeniable. And then almost by accident, we found it. It started on a random Tuesday, with Jake scrolling through a tech forum while we were debugging a new update. He sat up so fast that his chair nearly tipped over. Dude, check this out. I glanced over. What? He turned his laptop toward me. It was a post buried deep in a cybersecurity forum, written by some anonymous user. The guy claimed he had stumbled upon a serious security flaw in one of the country's largest banking systems, Northbridge Financial. I frowned. That's got to be fake. No way a major bank is running unsecured code. Yeah, Jake said. That's what I thought too. But look at this. The post included technical details, enough that anyone with half a brain in cybersecurity could tell it wasn't nonsense. It described a vulnerability in the bank's transaction system, a flaw that could, under the right conditions, allow unauthorized transfers to go completely undetected. If it was real, it was bad. Holy shit, I muttered. If this is legit, someone could wipe out millions before the bank even knew what hit them. Jake nodded, and they'd have no way of tracing it back. I felt my heartbeat pick up. This was exactly the kind of problem our AI system was built for. If we could prove the vulnerability existed before any hackers could exploit it, and if we could fix it, it would be our golden ticket. But there was a problem. We weren't supposed to have access to Northbridge's system. We couldn't just waltz in and start testing our software on their infrastructure. That would be, in very simple legal terms, highly illegal. Jake drummed his fingers on the desk. Okay, worst case scenario. We report it to Northbridge and hope they don't threaten to sue us for poking around where we shouldn't be. I exhaled. Or best case scenario, we fix it for them and they pay us. He grinned. Let's find out which one it is. We spent the next 72 hours doing nothing but working on Northbridge's system. We didn't sleep. We barely ate. Every time one of us started to doze off, the other shoved a cup of coffee in his face and kept going. The deeper we dug, the more we realized that the vulnerability was real and worse than we thought. By the time we had mapped out a solution, it felt like our brains were on fire. But we had done it. We had built a fix that could completely patch the security flaw. Now we just had to convince Northbridge that we weren't criminals. The email we sent was very carefully worded. To the Northbridge Financial Security Team, we have identified a critical vulnerability in your system that could lead to significant financial losses if left unpatched. We have also developed a solution that can permanently fix this issue. We are willing to share our findings in exchange for a discussion on implementing this solution securely. Our intent is purely ethical, and we are prepared to provide full technical documentation upon request. We believe this is an urgent matter that requires immediate attention. Sincerely, Ethan Cole, Lisa, Jake Morrison, founders. NextGuard Security. Then we waited. And waited. And then, at 2 a.m., my phone rang. This is Richard Hayes, the voice said. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Northbridge Financial. Tell me everything you know. The next morning, Jake and I found ourselves sitting in a Northbridge boardroom, surrounded by a dozen high-ranking executives who looked like they wanted to either shake our hands or throw us in federal prison. Hayes, a sharp-eyed man with graying hair, folded his arms. You understand that accessing our system without authorization is a serious offense? I nodded. We didn't breach your system. We found the vulnerability through publicly available information and simulations. We're not hackers. We're problem solvers. Jake pulled up our demonstration, showing them exactly how the flaw could be exploited and how our AI-driven security system could prevent it in real time. The room was silent as they watched our software work. When it was over, Hayes exhaled and exchanged a look with the other executives. Then he turned back to us. How much do you want for the solution? I kept my face neutral, but inside, my heart was racing. We'd prefer to license our security system to you as an ongoing service, I said. We're not just offering a one-time fix. We're offering a future-proof solution that ensures this never happens again. Jake and I had agreed beforehand. We weren't taking a one-time payout. This was our chance to establish ourselves. Hayes nodded slowly. Send us the contract. We'll talk numbers. By the time we walked out of the building, I knew it had worked. We had just landed our biggest deal yet. Within a week, Northbridge Financial officially became our first major client. The moment word got out that one of the biggest banks in the country was trusting our technology, everything changed. Suddenly, we weren't nobodies anymore. 2 more banks reached out within days. Then a third. Instead of chasing investors, investors started chasing us. We weren't just a struggling startup anymore. We were a rising force. Success changes people, or more accurately, it changes the way people treat you. When Jake and I had been struggling, scraping by on instant ramen and blind ambition, we were invisible. Investors dismissed us. Clients ignored us. People like my father saw me as a failure. But after Northbridge Financial became our client, everything shifted. Within weeks, our inbox was flooded. 3 more major banks reached out, wanting consultations on their cybersecurity. Investors, actual, legitimate venture capitalists, started calling us instead of the other way around. Our software had gone from an unproven experiment to an industry disruptor almost overnight. Jake and I barely had time to breathe. We were in back-to-back meetings, hiring more engineers, negotiating contracts. Priya, who we'd initially brought on as a part-time contractor, became our first official employee. We moved out of Jake's dingy apartment and into an actual office, a small but respectable space in downtown San Francisco. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting to be taken seriously. People wanted to be in business with us. And that's when I got the call I never expected. It was a number I recognized immediately, but hadn't seen on my phone in over 3 years. I hesitated for a full minute before answering. Ethan, My father's voice was calm, measured. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't berating me. If anything, he sounded careful. It's been a while. I leaned back in my office chair, staring out the window. Yeah, it has. I heard about your company. He let the words hang for a second. NextGuard, isn't it? So that's what this was. He hadn't called because he missed me. He hadn't called because he regretted cutting me off. He called because he saw me as valuable now. Let's have dinner, he said. We should talk. A year ago, I might have jumped at the offer. 3 years ago, I would have killed for it. But now, I had nothing to prove to him. I didn't need his approval, his validation, or, most importantly, his money. Still, a part of me was curious. Fine, I said. Dinner. He picked a restaurant, of course. A high-end steakhouse I had been to 100 times growing up. The kind of place where every table had its own personal waiter and the cheapest bottle of wine cost more than my monthly rent back when I was living in Jake's apartment. I arrived exactly on time. My father was already there, seated at a private booth, dressed in an immaculate tailored suit. He barely looked like he had aged in the past 3 years. Same sharp gaze, same unreadable expression. For a moment, it felt like stepping back into the past. Like I was still the college dropout, sitting across from him, waiting for his approval. But I wasn't that person anymore. I sat down, not bothering with pleasantries. So, what did you want to talk about? My father smiled slightly, as if amused by my directness. Straight to business. I can respect that. He leaned back. You've done well for yourself. I know. His lips pressed together for half a second before he continued. I've been following your company's growth. Northbridge was an impressive move. And now you have 3 more banks on board. You're in a position to scale, but you're also in a volatile industry. Cybersecurity is a war zone. The bigger you get, the bigger your targets. I didn't react, but I knew where he was going with this. You need connections, he said smoothly. Real backing. You've done well so far, but if you want to survive in the long run, you need more than just talent and luck. You need experience. You need stability. I set my knife down carefully. Let me guess. You're offering that stability. My father took a sip of his wine. I can introduce you to people. People who can take your company to the next level. Government contracts, high-level enterprise deals, things that will ensure you don't just become another startup that burns bright and then fades out. He let that sink in. Then he added, all I ask in return is a stake in NextGuard. There it was. The real reason he wanted this dinner. He didn't see me as a son. He saw me as a business opportunity. I exhaled slowly, glancing down at the table. 3 years ago, I would have killed for his approval. Now I just felt tired. I looked him dead in the eye. No, his eyebrows lifted slightly. No, you cut me off, I said. You told me I was a disappointment, that I was wasting my life. And now that I'm successful, you want a piece of it? I shook my head. I built this without you, without your money, without your connections. And I sure as hell don't need them now. For the first time that night, I saw something flicker across his face. Not anger, not disappointment, something closer to surprise. Like he genuinely hadn't expected me to say no. I understand you're proud, he said after a moment. But don't let pride get in the way of good business. This isn't pride, I said. This is principle. You wrote me off. You made your choice. I stood up. Now I'm making mine. He didn't try to stop me as I walked away. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Investors sent over final contract. We're officially worth $100 million. I smiled to myself. I didn't need my father's approval anymore. I had already won. Rejecting my father's offer felt like closing the last unfinished chapter of my past. I had walked away from his world, built something from nothing, and now, for the first time in my life, I had the power. But if I had learned anything from growing up in the Cole family, it was that power was never given up easily. I expected some kind of response. Maybe a passive-aggressive message, maybe a snide comment through my mother. What I didn't expect was Olivia coming after me like a corporate assassin. It started with a formal letter, a legal threat. Dear Mr. Cole, it has come to our attention that NextGuard Security is utilizing proprietary cybersecurity algorithms that bear significant resemblance to existing patents held by Cole Lisa Langley Legal Consulting. If these concerns are not addressed immediately, we will be forced to pursue all legal avenues available. Sincerely, Olivia Cole. ESQ. I stared at the email, barely suppressing a bitter laugh. It was such a classic move, straight from my father's playbook. Olivia didn't care about patents. There were no patents. NextGuard software was built from the ground up by me, Jake, and our engineers. But that wasn't the point. She wasn't trying to win a lawsuit. She was trying to slow us down. Jake leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. This is total bullshit. Obviously. She doesn't actually think we stole anything, does she? No, I said, shaking my head. She just wants to drag us into a legal battle and drain our time, money, and resources. It was a war of attrition. We were growing fast, and Olivia knew it. She couldn't beat us in the market, so she was trying to choke us in the courtroom. But what she didn't know was that we had just signed a multi-million-dollar deal with Titan Cybersecurity. Titan wasn't just another client. They were the cybersecurity firm, the kind of company that governments and Fortune 500 corporations trusted to keep their data safe. They had been watching us for months, analyzing our AI-driven software, testing its capabilities. And when they finally made an offer, it wasn't just a contract, it was a partnership. With Titan behind us, NextGuard wasn't just another startup anymore. We had real backing, real firepower, and that meant Olivia had just picked a fight she couldn't win. The next few months were brutal. Olivia escalated the attack. Lawsuits, delays, smear campaigns. She leveraged every legal loophole she could find, tying us up in court with nuisance litigation. She fed stories to journalists, painting NextGuard as a shady startup with questionable ethics. At first it worked. Investors hesitated. Clients called us, nervous about the lawsuits. Even some of our engineers started wondering if we were in over our heads. But I refused to let her dictate the narrative. We went on the offensive. I hired the best lawyers in Silicon Valley, not to fight the case, but to dismantle it before it ever saw the inside of a courtroom. Every claim Olivia threw at us, we countered with hard evidence. We made it clear that if she kept pushing, we would sue for defamation. At the same time, we doubled down on our growth. I knew that if we let this battle slow us down, we would lose. So instead of playing defense, I went all in. We expanded. We hired more engineers, signed new clients, and made damn sure that every single investor and journalist knew that NextGuard wasn't just surviving, we were thriving. And then, Titan Cybersecurity made a move I hadn't expected. They publicly endorsed us. They released a statement. NextGuard Security represents the next generation of AI-driven cybersecurity. We stand behind their technology and believe in their future. That statement changed everything. Overnight, the lawsuits stopped. Investors who had been hesitant jumped back in. New clients came flooding in. And Olivia? She disappeared. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. But I knew what had happened. She lost. And in our family, losing wasn't something you admitted. You just pretended the battle never happened. But I never forgot. And I never forgave. For 3 years, we had fought, clawed, and bled for this moment. It had started in a cramped apartment, running on caffeine and desperation, then turned into a scrappy startup barely surviving. We had outlasted rejections, betrayals, and legal warfare. And now, we were sitting in our downtown San Francisco office, staring at a document that would change everything. NextGuard Security, initial public offering projected valuation, $2.1 billion. Jake let out a low whistle, leaning back in his chair as he ran a hand through his hair. Dude, what the hell? We actually did it. I exhaled, staring at the numbers, still processing the sheer weight of it. Yeah, I said. We did. It didn't feel real. Not yet. We had been so busy expanding, signing deals, and prepping for the IPO that we hadn't had a second to stop and just absorb what was happening. NextGuard wasn't just a startup anymore. It was a tech giant in the making. We had offices in 3 cities, a team of over 200 engineers, clients ranging from Wall Street banks to government agencies. And now, we were about to become a publicly traded company. Jake grinned, nudging me. You realize that in 48 hours, we're going to be billionaires, right? I smirked. Yeah, I guess that's a nice bonus. Jake rolled his eyes. A nice bonus. Jesus, Ethan, at least pretend to be excited. I was excited, but more than anything, I was relieved. Because this wasn't just money. This was proof. Proof that I hadn't needed my father. Proof that Olivia hadn't destroyed us. Proof that every late night, every rejection, every moment of doubt had been worth it. And that's when my phone rang. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Ethan. My father's voice was different this time. Measured, yes, but not the usual cold control I had come to expect. For the first time in my life, he sounded uncertain. I didn't say anything. I just let him sit in the silence. He cleared his throat. I saw the IPO announcement. Of course he had. It was everywhere. CNBC, Bloomberg, Forbes. The headlines all said the same thing. NextGuard Security goes public at a $2 billion valuation. "Congratulations," he said, but the word felt forced, like it physically pained him to say it. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice neutral. "Thanks." He hesitated. "Listen, I know we've had our differences, but I think it's time we put the past behind us. Maybe we should talk." I almost laughed. 3 years ago, he had signed my trust fund away like I was a lost cause. He had told me I was a disappointment. Now that I was worth billions, suddenly I was worth his time. I let the silence stretch just long enough for him to feel it. Then I said, "I don't think we have anything to talk about." He exhaled sharply. "Ethan, be reasonable. We're still family." "No," I said, voice calm but firm. "We're not." Before he could respond, I hung up. Jake raised an eyebrow. "That your dad?" "Yeah." Jake smirked. "Let me guess. Now that we're rich, he suddenly wants to reconnect." I nodded. Jake snorted. "Damn, you gonna send him a fruit basket or something?" I grinned. "Nah. I think ringing the opening bell at the stock exchange is enough." And just like that, I put my phone away and went back to running my company. The energy in the stock exchange was electric. Cameras flashed, investors murmured in excitement, and the sound of trading monitors flickering with live data filled the air. This was it, the culmination of every late night, every setback, every time we had been told we weren't good enough. NextGuard Security was officially going public. I stood at the podium, my fingers resting against the brass handle of the opening bell. Jake was beside me, dressed in an actual suit for the first time in his life, shifting on his feet like he still couldn't believe we were really here. To be fair, neither could I. Behind us, a massive screen displayed our company's logo, NextGuard Security, $2.1 billion IPO. And as I glanced at the crowd gathered below, my eyes landed on two faces I never expected to see here. My father and Olivia. There they were, standing among the sea of executives, investors, and media personnel, dressed in their usual power suits, looking like they belonged. But for the first time, they weren't in control. For the first time, they weren't the ones being celebrated. For the first time, they were the outsiders. Olivia's face was unreadable, but I knew her well enough to recognize the tension in her jaw, the way she held her shoulders stiff, like she was forcing herself to stay composed. My father, on the other hand, didn't bother hiding his reaction. He looked at me the way a man looks at a chessboard after realizing he's already lost the game. 3 years ago, he had dismissed me, signed away my trust fund, laughed at my dreams, told me I was nothing. Now, I was standing on a stage while the world watched me succeed. I didn't acknowledge them. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just turned back to the podium, wrapped my fingers around the handle, and rang the opening bell. The sound echoed through the exchange, loud, final, unmistakable. A declaration that NextGuard had arrived. That I had arrived. The room erupted into applause. Journalists rushed forward, snapping photos, capturing the moment that would be on the front pages of business magazines by morning. But I barely heard any of it. All I could focus on was the look on my father's face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even disappointment. It was realization. Realization that he had underestimated me. That he had thrown me away, thinking I was worthless, only to watch me build something far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. And now he was just another face in the crowd. I stepped down from the podium, and as I made my way through the throng of reporters and executives, I felt someone step into my path. Olivia. She was still as poised as ever, still wearing that sharp, calculated expression that had always made her a force to be reckoned with in a courtroom. But there was something else in her eyes now, something I had never seen before. Doubt. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but I didn't stop. I just walked past her, past my father, past everything they had ever represented. Let them feel what it was like to be nothing in my world. The after-party was everything I expected. Loud, extravagant, and filled with people who suddenly wanted to be my best friend. The venue was one of those luxury rooftop lounges in downtown San Francisco, the kind with glass walls overlooking the city skyline, where a single bottle of champagne cost more than my first laptop. The air buzzed with conversation, investors clinking glasses, executives angling for introductions, journalists fishing for exclusive interviews. Jake was already 3 drinks in, laughing with a group of our engineers near the bar, while Priya was deep in conversation with a cybersecurity executive who had probably once ignored our emails. Everything was perfect. Then I saw him, my father, standing near the entrance, watching me. Even from across the room, I could see it, the desperation. He hadn't come alone. Olivia was beside him, dressed in her usual impeccable fashion, but there was something different in the way she carried herself. She wasn't the smug, untouchable lawyer anymore. She wasn't the golden child standing at the top of the world. No, she had lost, and she knew it. I sighed, swirling the champagne in my glass, debating whether I should just ignore them. But of course, my father didn't give me that option. He made his way toward me with the confidence of a man who had never been denied anything in his life. Olivia followed a step behind, her expression tight, unreadable. "Ethan," my father said smoothly, his voice dripping with forced warmth. "I was hoping we could talk." I glanced around the room, half expecting someone to come pull me away, but no one interrupted. I was too successful now. No one dared interfere. I could already see people whispering, watching us out of the corners of their eyes. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the showdown. I took a slow sip of my champagne, then set the glass down. "Talk about what?" My father smiled, as if we were just two businessmen at a casual networking event. "The past is the past. We're family. I think it's time we put all this behind us." I almost laughed. 3 years ago, he had called me a disappointment. He had cut me off without hesitation, handed my trust fund to Olivia, and told me to grow up. And now, standing here, in a room filled with people who had come to celebrate my success, he wanted to act like none of that had ever happened? I leaned against the bar, studying him. "Let me guess," I said. "Now that NextGuard is worth $2 billion, you suddenly want to be a part of my life?" He didn't even flinch. "Ethan, I've always wanted the best for you. I knew you had potential. I just didn't believe in me," I finished for him. Until it was too late. His jaw tightened ever so slightly, but his voice remained even. "There's no reason to dwell on the past. What's important is that we move forward." I glanced at Olivia. She hadn't said a word yet, but I could see it in her eyes. This was killing her. She had spent her entire life winning, always staying ahead, always being the one in control. And now, for the first time, she had lost. "You've done well for yourself," Olivia finally said, her voice measured, careful. "No one is denying that." I arched an eyebrow. That almost sounded like a compliment. She exhaled sharply. "You built something impressive, Ethan. That's all I'm saying." It was the closest thing to respect I had ever heard from her. But I knew better than to believe she had changed. Olivia wasn't the kind of person who admitted defeat. If she was here or she was standing beside my father, it meant she wanted something, and I had no interest in giving it to her. I picked up my champagne again, taking another sip. Then I smiled. "You know what's funny?" I said. "For years I thought I wanted this. I thought I wanted you both to finally see me, to respect me, to admit that you were wrong." I set the glass down and looked my father dead in the eyes. "But now? I don't care." His face darkened. "Ethan, family?" I cut him off, my voice cold. "You made it clear I was never part of yours." And then I turned and walked away, just like they had once walked away from me. The week after the IPO was a blur of media interviews, contract negotiations, and celebrations. My inbox was flooded with emails from investors, reporters, and old acquaintances suddenly remembering we had once been close. NextGuard stock had soared past its initial valuation, and analysts were already calling us the future of cybersecurity. I should have been exhausted, but I wasn't. I felt alive. Jake and I barely had time to process what we had done. We had built something from the ground up, fought tooth and nail to keep it, and now we were at the top. Our company wasn't just another tech startup anymore. It was a force. Governments wanted to work with us. Fortune 500 companies were lining up to sign contracts. We had made it. And then, in the middle of it all, Olivia emailed me. The subject line was blank. The body of the email was even shorter. I was wrong. That was it. No excuses. No explanations. Just 3 words. I stared at it for a long time, rereading it, waiting for something more. But nothing else came. For a brief moment, I considered replying. Not to gloat, just to acknowledge it, to let her know that I had read it. But then I closed my laptop. I never replied. Because Olivia wasn't my problem anymore. My father wasn't my problem anymore. None of them were. I had spent years chasing their approval, wanting them to see me as more than just the kid who played with computers, wanting them to respect me. But standing at the top of the empire I had built without them, I realized something. I didn't need their validation. I never had. I looked around my office. Our office. It wasn't the tiny, cramped apartment where we had started. It wasn't some rented co-working space we could barely afford. It was a skyscraper in the heart of San Francisco, with entire floors dedicated to NextGuard's operations. The walls were covered with blueprints for future expansions, plans for new technologies we hadn't even announced yet. And all of it existed because Jake and I had refused to give up. because we had chosen to bet on ourselves. Jake knocked on my door, poking his head in. Dude, you coming? I blinked. Coming where? He grinned. We're celebrating, remember? Priya's already got a bottle of Dom open. Something about not wanting to drink peasant champagne now that we're billionaires. I laughed, shaking my head. Right? Give me a sec. As Jake left, I glanced back at my laptop, at Olivia's unread email still sitting there. Then I shut it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't anger. It's success. And I had already won.